me, this would be the interesting exercise. If the central banks, which would mean also the BIS,
Yeah.
and the banks in London and New York would agree to stop issuing and trading paper gold and silver contracts, paper gold and silver derivatives for, let's say, a couple weeks, and just let the price be set by the supply and demand for actual physical gold, I think you'd see a complete reset in the price of gold and silver.
Hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus here with you for Arcadia Economics weekly silver and gold market update with Dave Kranzler, who today maybe will share the secret. Dave, you know, he's got his tennis gear on, so he doesn't want me to ramble too much. He's going to go. Do we have any Vegas line on today's match?
No.
Any favorite? You going to wipe the court with this guy, or?
Well, it's actually doubles.
Okay. All right. Well, I know the audience is excited. I wonder how you get time to play tennis. I'm still trying to figure out how you have time to know everything about just about any stock I've ever heard of and write it down in the great journals you do. By the way, I did read your mining stock journal, which you said I wasn't going to, but I love reading it. People love reading it. They love hearing from you. So it's a pleasure to have you back on today, sir. And how are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. Always a pleasure to be on here. I love doing this show. I think it's informative as well as entertaining, hopefully.
Yeah, well, my mom's a big Kranzler fan. She's gonna get the Kranzler T-shirt. I don't know if she's a subscriber yet, but maybe to hook her because she does have a mining stock portfolio, believe it or not. And I'm wondering, we saw this rally in both gold and silver over the past week. Actually, silver too. It actually went up. Does not happen often. Are people front running the Fed? Because we talked last week about how the Fed's doing their QE unlimited now, Bernanke, and I said that intentionally. I just lumped them all into one body that they stick a different mask on. Bernanke, Powell, Yellen saying more money printing is on the way. So are people buying gold and silver in advance of that?
Well, here, I wrote this today. It's part of the intro to my next issue of the Mining Stock Journal, May 28th. So I thought I'd share it. It's from the 60 Minutes interview. I guess it was 2 Sundays ago.
That was quite a whopper, wasn't it?
Was that last Sunday? I forget. I'm losing track of time in my old age. But the 60 Minutes guy, Scott Pelley or Peely, however you say his name, he's like, "Where does it come from?" And referring to money, you just print it. And Powell said, "We print it digitally. So as a central bank, we have the ability to create money digitally." Now that's the reference to the famous Bernanke 2002. You know, we have a technology called the printing press, and we can create an unlimited amount of money electronically and costlessly. And he said, we do that by buying treasury bills or bonds or other government guaranteed securities, and that actually increases the money supply. And then a little bit later, he goes on to say, in response to another question, no, there's really no limit to what we can do with these lending programs, which is really just de facto money printing. So there's a lot more we can do to support the economy. We're committed to doing everything we can as long as we need to. And those were his words, verbatim. And my response is, I almost fell off my chair after reading the comments, you know, and I referenced the whole thing as a public relations stunt on behalf of the Fed. And there's two important points that stand out like silent screams in Powell's words. One, 99% of the currency. It's important to understand the difference between currency and money, right? Currency is something that is created that is a derivative of money, okay? And historically, the currency that's been created is derived from the value of the gold that each central bank holds. In other words, a gold-backed currency system. The currency now is backed by nothing. It's a liability of the Federal Reserve. That's why it says Federal Reserve notes on each bill. on each denomination of bill. I mean, it's a note issued by the Fed, backed by full faith and credit of the United States government. So right now we got a government that's fully corrupt. More lies spew out of the government every day, and that's not just the White House I'm fingering, it's the entire system, including the judicial system. And I believe the amount of treasuries outstanding is getting close to 26 trillion, which is well in excess of the GDP. So essentially, the currency printed digitally by Jay Powell is not really backed by much other than massive liabilities. So anyway, the point is, it's the currency, not money, printed by the Fed, goes directly to the banks or funds the government debt issuance, which is about ready to go parabolic. Okay, a small trickle might get to Main Street to quote unquote support the economy. The second point is the Fed is willing to print an infinite amount of currency to keep the financial system propped up. In other words, the Fed is indeed printing helicopter money, but it's dropping it on the banks and not the economy at large. Now, to get back to your question, are people front running the Fed? Well, I mean, yeah, we saw gold and silver soar after those comments on 60 Minutes. That wasn't physical gold and silver that was being bought. I mean, there's not much of that stuff around to buy right now that's available to buy. That was paper gold and silver. It was futures, LBMA forwards, and securities, paper securities like GLD and SLV. That's not gold and silver. All right. So yeah, I mean, there's probably some momentum players going in there, and there's probably some people who actually really want to believe that gold or GLD and SLV are gold and silver. So they're probably buying it, thinking, oh, this is good. I have some exposure to gold and silver. Well, no, you don't. You've got exposure to a security issued by the trust that oversees GLD, but it's not explicitly connected to the gold that is or may not be in HSBC's vault, HSBC being the custodian of GLD. So, I mean, here to me, this would be the interesting exercise. If the central banks, which would mean also the BIS, and the banks in London and New York would agree to stop issuing and trading paper gold and silver contracts, paper gold and silver derivatives for, let's say, a couple weeks, and just let the price be set by the supply and demand for actual physical gold, I think you'd see a complete reset in the price of gold and silver. And that's one way that you might see a reset. The other way that you might see a reset is if a big entity like the People's Bank of China or Russia's central bank, I think it's called the Bank of Russia, issued a offered, wanted, and comp, meaning we want to see offer, an offer, wanted, and comp for a massive amount of gold. I'm not talking about 10,000 ounces. I'm talking about 100 tons of gold. We want an offer, wanted, and comp for the best price, in which the party offering 100 tons of gold can guarantee delivery as soon as the transaction settles, is completed, of physical gold bars, 400-ounce gold bars. Now that, I think you'd probably see the price of gold double or triple almost instantaneously if we were to try that exercise to find true price discovery in the price of gold. And you could probably even do lesser amounts and cause a price reset, though not to the extent that 100 tons would.
It makes a lot of sense to me. As you know, I talked with Alistair McLeod earlier this week.
I can't wait to hear that interview, by the way.
Another person that is a reason, not just saying gold's going to $5,000 tomorrow every day. He mentioned a banking crisis within a month or two. It's interesting to me that even, we've all thought one day this is going to happen. And, obviously my own opinion, it seems to me like there's a lot of smoke coming out of somewhere. Any thoughts on how much longer do you think this can drag out for? I mean, it seems Seems different than before. Again, we've learned from the past 9 years. Be careful because they can drag it out longer. And here's, $17 silver as we sit here today. So, any care to take a stab at that? How much longer you could see this possibly going?
No way, man. I've learned my lesson on putting time frames and price targets on gold and silver 12 years ago, 13 years ago, because the market is just so manipulated. And it's going to be one of those slowly and then suddenly things.
Yep.
And as long as counterparties are still willing to accept paper derivative gold and silver in lieu of actual physical gold and silver, then the charade can continue. I mean, you wouldn't even need any physical gold and silver anywhere. You could just take all the physical gold and silver and bury it in the ground somewhere and let the Chinese and Russian military guard it all so that no one can touch it. And as long as counterparties are still willing to accept paper gold in lieu of, the game can continue. But at some point, and I honestly don't know when, I think we're starting to see it happen. I mean, we've talked about this ad nauseum. I think it really started happening intensively probably in October, November. There's people or parties or entities. I think most of them are probably Eastern Hemisphere based, but I don't know. It could be some very wealthy Western Hemisphere families and businesses, whatever, are actually starting to understand that they need to have control of the physical gold and silver that they buy under their own lock and key or in vaults outside of New York and London. So I had forgotten about this, but the location of the GLD vault's not even disclosed. As far as I know, other than the insiders involved with the GLD operations, no one really knows where the vault is.
Yep.
So,
I mean, you don't feel comfortable with HSBC? They said it's good to go, and their reputation speaks for itself.
yeah, money launderers, drug dealer, and arms dealer financiers. Sure, I trust them. All the big banks do that, though. HSBC, for whatever reason, just got fingered for it. So at any rate, I think there is a scramble by people or parties or entities that understand what's going on to source physical gold and silver and get it out of the New York, London system. So, I mean, a good example, look at Venezuela. I mean, Venezuela's about ready to send fighter jets over to London so that they can get their gold bars out of the Bank of England.
Could Venezuela's gold actually be holding the entire global Ponzi scheme together at this point? I don't.
It seems like it's probably been hypothecated, dozens of times.
And to be clear here, I'm speculating, but it's like you start to see these footprints. You live through September 11th, you live through a bunch of these other ones, and you start to see. So I'm not claiming by any means to know exactly what's going on with Venezuela's gold, but the coverage of it, sure. And then there were those reports a year or two ago where Citibank would end up with a chunk of it, or Deutsche Bank. And
how about when the U.S. went in and overthrew the Ukrainian government?
Mm-hmm.
The first thing that they did was they airlifted all of Ukraine's gold out of there. The U.S. military airlifted it out. Where did that gold go?
Yep. And although Dave, I think you're smart and all that. You do a lot of good things, but I gotta call you out on this one. You said that the economy was weak back in October, but I know you said you watched 60 Minutes. Jerome Powell said that the economy, this wasn't like the subprime bubble because the economy was doing great until Corona hit. Now, of course, I'm a little confused because I was wondering why they were already lowering interest rates before that and doing trillions of dollars of.
Yeah, where were they printing money? They were printing money in September.
I mean, what did you think of that when he just? I mean, not like it's new that any of these guys are lying, but I mean that. There's a lot of stuff that comes across to me as disingenuous, but it was like, wow, did he really just say that? Because
of course he's lying. He's a politician. course he's going to say that. If the Federal Reserve, if he got up there and said, "My bad," guess what? This economy's been in a real recession since 2008. All of the growth that you've seen has been created by monetary devaluation, aka inflation. There's been no real growth in the economy since 2007. So, my bad. I'm sorry. I mean, the markets would collapse.
Yeah, and speaking of interesting markets, to be fair, I don't think I specifically brought up silver last week, so that means we're overdue. Quick question here. Here is and I know likely fictitious holdings, but is interesting. You see here in 2011, this is SLV and the other trust. They have, let's call that 650 million ounces. And you can see that's when the price hit 50. So the entire time the price was declining, you see almost a 45-degree, maybe not quite 45 degrees, it goes from under 700 million to a billion before last summer, when another 250 million ounces have been added. So clearly doesn't match the price. The US Mint also reports record Silver Eagle sales between 2011 and 2015. I've talked with Andy Sheckman of Miles Franklin. He says him and the bullion dealers talk to each other and like, we don't know who's buying this. Ted Butler thinks it's JP Morgan. But what we can see, or it seems like a lot of money's going in there, building on the leverage. And I wonder, when gold is crossing through 1900 and 2000, and they're sticking gold and silver back on the CNBC ticker, and it's like you can already picture some of the Wall Streeters are like, hey Bill, what's this thing? GLOD? It's up. No, gold. And it's up big today. What is that? I mean, are they going to be able to keep the price of silver under $20 when that's happening and the Fed is just doing more by the day?
That's a good question. I mean, obviously, I think the answer is no. I don't know if this is like one of those things where they're going to be able to keep it under 20 until they can't, and then gold goes straight up. I mean, it went nearly straight up it was really from probably mid 2010 to April 2011. So, again, I don't remember the starting point in mid 2010, but I know it went up really quickly. So, I don't know. And I've also had conversations with people that I've known for a long time in doing this sector. And I think we're kind of coming to the conclusion that it's going to be a slowly and then suddenly thing, where the suddenly thing is just an overnight reset in the global monetary system. I mean, that's what we saw. That's what happened. Well, we didn't see it. I mean, obviously, my parents weren't even alive, but that's what happened in Weimar Germany. They overnight, while people were sleeping, they revalued the mark, and then they had to replace it. So I think that's probably the likely scenario. And I think this, I think what could hasten this is the fact that Trump, for some reason, he just continues to beat on China like a redheaded stepchild. And I'm sure it's all about getting votes. But at some point, if China wanted to, overnight they could reset the entire monetary system. So I think that's maybe how it happens. And I mean, the problem is, it's like woohoo, we wake up one day and silver's at 200 and gold's at, say, 10,000. So what's that, a 50-to-1 gold silver ratio or whatever? But the problem is, you're going to have to board up your windows and lock your doors and get your guns loaded, because that monetary reset would instantaneously throw the bulk of this country into third world status. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. And that's one scenario that I think is how it could happen.
Yeah, and it's I don't know if you could hear that, but as soon as you started discussing U.S. foreign policy, Nibbles started barking and growling. He's like, even even offends dogs now with the things the U.S. does. Although last one for you. Although one quick note about silver that I find interesting. I'm sure you caught this week, First Majestic, basically, or maybe it was last week, said, we're not going to keep selling our silver at rigged prices. I know there's been a school of thought for a while that a lot of these mining executives don't like talking about manipulation because they're worried about having their financing pulled. I had heard that for years, and it's interesting. Fast forward, I mean, you see, I have a lot of different mining executives. I find they're darn intrigued by it, and especially some of them. There's one guy I gave the big silver short to, and he's like, he's feeling great about his company now because I don't think people really grasped what was going on. So again, I thank you for being a part of that. Dave Kranzler is chapter number 1, folks. Let's say that on slot. First guy I asked.
Can't wait to read that book.
Get to the heart of silver. And after we wrap up here, Dave, I'm going to try and finish the back. So we do finally hit the printer tomorrow. So I got one more for you here before we do that. I think would be helpful for folks because I see a lot of comments. Well, I'm thinking about buying gold or silver, but the premiums are high, which certainly is understandable. And yes, something people should factor in. Although, are we getting to a point where rather than saying the premiums are high, where physical silver is somewhere, depending on the product, between 20 or 25 bucks, that at some point that's just the price and no one cares what the COMEX says? Because the premiums are high relative to the COMEX. They're high relative to GLD and SLV, but maybe the physical market, it's a small but significant semantic linguistic difference. I mean, do we start looking at the physical as just the price at some point?
I mean, I don't know what it means when you say the premium is high. I mean, if it's, you got basically a $9 premium for 1 ounce silver coins, minted bullion coins. So that's what, let's just call it, for sake of argument, a 50% premium. I mean, that's the premium that we saw in 2008 before silver started to take off. So, I mean, it's high relative to what? It's high relative to where the premium was a year ago. Well, it's not clear to me that, let's just use $25 or it's really $26 now generically for the price to buy a 1 ounce silver coin. That's the price. So the premium's not high. I mean, I don't really give a crap what the COMEX is trying to tell us the price of silver is. That's not the price of silver. 100-ounce bars aren't changing hands there. I mean, God knows what really goes on in the COMEX vaults when contracts are settled. Most of that silver doesn't leave the vault. So how do you know it's even really there? Yep. I actually did this exercise yesterday. I went to 3 or 4 different national bullion dealers, and almost all of them had no 100-ounce silver bars, none, zero. So we don't know what the price is for 100-ounce silver bars because there aren't any to offer out there to the public. And we don't know what kind of exchange transaction is really happening in London or in New York as far as the contract settlements are. So, I mean, right now, I don't really think you can say that. I don't think you can really define the price of silver beyond what someone's willing to pay for 1 ounce coins, because those are available and they're not available in large quantities. So I mean, is the premium high? I think people who say the premium is high are high. Does that make sense?
It does. And
whoever's saying the premium is high has no clue what they're talking about when it comes to understanding price discovery in markets. And right now, the only price discovery that we have is what's going on in the 1 ounce silver coin market. Like I said, go try to find 100-ounce bars. If you want to buy them from national bullion dealers, you can't find them. And you can't go knock on the COMEX door and say, hey, man, can I buy some 100-ounce bars? They're going to tell you to beat it. That's not how we do business here. you got to buy a contract and then pre-fund it for delivery, and then those bars stay in our vault.
Yeah, although I'm sure, Dave, the next time you're looking for some gold or silver products, you're probably just going to email Arcadia at milesfranklin.com, where if there's any way to find those, Andy will likely find them and beat the online dealers in price too. So,
One more point about this, by the way. We had this problem back in 2009. We were long. I think it was the April silver contract, and we wanted to take delivery of my fund. Okay, you know who the counterparty was? Guess.
HSBC.
It was HSBC.
Yeah.
HSBC was the counterparty. Okay, so the way the contract's written is, they need to make delivery within 3 days of the end of the contract expiration date. Okay, it took us 6 weeks beyond that to get delivery of the bars. And the reason we wanted the bars, we took the bars off the COMEX. It took frickin' 6 weeks for them to make the bars available to us. And this was in 2009. So it's not like this is a new problem on the COMEX. This has been going on for a long time. It's just a lot more people are involved in the market now, and there's a lot more general awareness of how corrupt everything is in New York and London. So it's not, it's not like this is a new issue that's all of a sudden cropped up and there's conspiracy theorists out there pointing fingers. This is a real life issue that we experienced in my fund back in 2009. So
yeah, and that makes
at any rate,
what you're
just
saying.
to elaborate on your Miles Franklin spiel there, I did recommend Miles Franklin to someone today, and to use your name as a reference.
Well, I appreciate that, and to what you just.
And I think everyone out in the audience who's buying silver should buy it from Miles Franklin and use Chris Marcus as the reference.
Wow, you're too kind, sir. Although I'll return the favor, because when you talked about people becoming increasingly aware of what's happening, certainly I think we're reaching people with your weekly appearance here. You have your great website, investmentresearchdynamics.com, where here, as the Fed goes Weimar, gold, silver miners will go parabolic, which people can find out more about with the Mining Stock Journal. Right here is a bi-weekly, twice per month, $20 a month. I think you should be charging more myself, because it's just that darn good what you have in there.
Probably.
I feel dumb by the time I'm finished reading it. I'm like, I get like my little insecurity, jealousy.
That's not the point.
You know that much.
You're supposed to hopefully have better understanding, not feel dumb.
Well, yeah, that's my own warped mind, but it's certainly, that's the thing. It's just it's almost a new language, but it's perfect, because each time I keep reading it, the drill programs make more sense, or all these terms that folks don't know but are going to be learning really quickly, or trying to learn really quickly, I think, as some of the prices escalate, which, again, at the end of the day, it seems like the Federal Reserve is going to guarantee that happens. So anyway, that's where you can pick up the Mining Stock Journal. Dave, go hit the courts. I don't want any mercy. Just smash that ball in. I want some stats, serve speed. Next week, we're going to dig into that. So I'll let you run, but thank you, sir.
Thanks, Chris.